The Tarkan dress discovered in 1913 was dated to nearly 5,500 years old, making it the oldest clothing ever recovered. Though the ancient Egyptians were probably not the first people to ever wear clothing, we haven't found any older than the Tarkan dress. Ancient clothing is just too fragile to survive in the archaeological record, and even pieces of fabric or cloth can be rare findings. The pieces that survive are often preserved because they are in extreme environmental conditions, like the dry conditions of the tomb where the Tarkan dress was found. But we do have some surviving pieces of cloth that are even older. For example, fragmented pieces of woven textiles were recovered in excavations of burials at the 9,000-year-old site of Çatalhöyük in Turkey. They were originally identified as wool, but reanalysis of the fibers found that they were actually made from bast fibers from tree bark. This brings the date for the use of clothing about 3,000 years before the Tarkan dress. Archaeologists discovered in Dudzwana cave in Georgia hundreds of flax fiber fragments. Some were spun and one has several knots. This might suggest that they were being prepared for use. Many of them appear to be dyed black, gray, turquoise, and pink. These fibers might have been part of a local industry that produced colorful textile and clothing. These flax fibers dated to approximately 30,000 years ago, more than triple the age of the earliest evidence for clothing. In the Sibdu cave in South Africa, archaeologists have uncovered a fragmented needle with a point so thin that it could have been used to delicately pierce through animal hide. If this is correct, then the oldest piece of evidence for clothing use stands at approximately 61,000 years old. Besides the direct evidence for clothing and the processes to make it, we also have some other ways to try and date its first use. There's two subspecies of human lice: the human head louse that feeds on the human scalp, and the human body louse that feeds on the body. But the body louse doesn't actually live on the body, it lives on human clothing. Scientists can trace back when these two subspecies diverged by sequencing segments of DNA from both head and body lice. The body lice originated at least by 83,000 years ago, and maybe as much as 170,000 years ago. This divergence likely happened when clothing was more frequently being used by ancient humans. Neanderthals have lived in Europe during the most recent ice age, which means that they had to deal with winter temperatures. And there is some evidence that suggests that Neanderthals did wear some clothing. For example, stone scrapers that were likely used to scrape soft tissues of animal hide, which was then used as a sort of clothing.